Hello, everyone. This is MMA Interesting Prospects podcast. Today, our guest is José Torres, who will fight on Super RIZIN for July 27th. Hello, Jose. How are you?
I'm great, man. Just finished practicing and getting ready for the fight in 2 weeks.
And how excited are you about your next fight? Because on the paper, he seems to be a really tough challenge.
It's a really fun challenge, and that's the way I look at it. The tougher the opponent, the better me comes out. And for him, he's very egotistical. It was a lottery-based system of how you pick your opponent in the bracket. I got put number two on the bracket, so I picked an empty spot, and I thought he would like to probably fight me in the finals, but his ego came out to play. He goes, "Oh, this is a new challenger." It's kind of like the prison mindset. You find the biggest, baddest guy and you beat him up, so no one's gonna mess with you. And I was like, oh, he's gonna pick me. He's gonna pick me, and he picked me first. So, I accept the challenge, and I'm excited because it's motivating because I know how good he is. So I have to 100% show up, and that's what's getting me through the fight camp. It's a last minute fight camp for me, last minute weight cut, which is the hardest part. But with a fun opponent in front of me, I mean, I'm definitely very, very excited.
But to be honest, I think that this fight can easily be a final of this tournament because I think that in the end you are just two best guys.
I think so as well, and I call it a finals fight, but it's a tournament and a fight where anything can happen. So even no matter who wins this next fight between him and I, somebody else could always land one shot and it ends it all. It doesn't matter. Again, the whole Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva thing, where Silva's having fun. He's like, oh, I'm gonna beat him up. I'll get to it. And that one shot changes the whole game and changes the whole fight. So for me, I do believe it's a finals fight. I believe it's going to spoil the tournament a little too early, but regardless, I believe whoever does win this will be in the finals inevitably.
But in the end, I think that there is something cool about tournaments, about Grand Prix. It doesn't matter whether it was like Pride, Strikeforce, later on Bellator. It's cool because there is actually no politics. It's just you know who you will fight in like semi-final or maybe in the final, and this is like great structure in MMA, I think.
It's very difficult too because a lot of us, like myself, fought last month, and for me, it's I'm not beat up, but I'm a little sore from my last fight. Was fat and happy, then called last minute for this one. It's like, oh, I gotta be ready. Okay, cool. Gotta cut the weight, make this fight. Everything goes well. Let's say I fight again. I fight in September. That's 2 more months. I have to make sure not just to win this fight, but be healthy after, both physically and mentally, to where, okay, I'm not getting too fat in between the fights to where the weight cuts are easier. So let's try my best to stay low. Let's not take too much damage and hopefully finish this fight as fast as possible because whatever injuries I sustain in this fight, I might bring to the next one and my next opponent might be able to take advantage of it. And for me, especially in Japan, I'm a big Dragon Ball Z fan. So it's like a Tenkaichi Budokai tournament where you don't know who you're fighting until they fight. And it's like, oh man, this is a hard matchup. So I think the champion of these type of style tournaments literally is the best in that tournament because you're fighting literally whoever's next, the best one up next. So even if I have quote unquote finals fight in the first match, the next guy might be even tougher and he even might be healthier than I am just because of the damage I might sustain in the first round. So it is a very difficult tournament, but it makes it that much more exciting to try to win.
And do you think that any other fighters, so the from last remain six of the fighters, do you have maybe one name that you think that he can be a tough matchup, but you still would be interested to fight him?
There's one guy, and I believe he's the underdog, just because he has the least, the smallest record. I don't know what country he's technically from, but from the Eastern Russian part side of the world. I don't know if he's Armenian or whatever the case may be, but it is a Russian style or wrestling based fighter, Sambo style fighter that I believe is only 5-0. But background wise, for people who don't know, he has over 200 plus Sambo fights and multiple world championships. So for people who don't know what Sambo is, it's probably one of the closest sports to MMA without being MMA, especially combat Sambo. So he's a good fighter. I believe he's an underdog, and he was a person that if I were to fight, I would see me fighting him in the semis or in the finals. And that's what I wanted to because I knew no matter who he fought, it was going to be a tough matchup. And he's not just a sambo, the old Dagestani style wrestlers that like to just wrestle. No, he's these new age fighters that can wrestle and strike. The Umars and the Islam Makachevs or the Muhammad Mokaevs. So I'm definitely excited to see where he goes and how his next fight is.
Yes, I think that overall there are few really good fighters in this tournament. So definitely the winner can be like considered as the one of the best in the world.
hmm it's a tough tournament to where again you look at myself, you look at my opponent Hiromasa, who's fought everyone, who's won the bantamweight Grand Prix, so he's been through this experience before. He's lost multiple times to win the Flyweight Championship, so it shows how hard and tough a lot of the opponents are that I'm going to be facing. So for me, a lot of these guys are veterans in the sport, and Japanese fighters just like myself or Mexican stereotypically, they just don't back down from any challenge, and that's why I believe Hiromasa picked me first because he knew I was the new guy, kind of one of the better guys in the bracket. All right, let's make a name and have everyone fear me in the next round. So I'm excited for it.
And you have experience fighting in both cage and the ring. And which one
Mhm.
do you prefer?
I prefer the cage just because I mean it's natural, it's more normal for us, but I can definitely tell you when I fought in the ring, which I haven't fought MMA in the ring since I was an amateur. So years later, I do it again as a professional for my last Ryzen fight. And I can definitely tell you because of their pride-based rules of, strikes to the head, you can knee to the head, you can kick to the head, all that stuff on the floor, it does change up a lot of things and it forces action. I remember being stuck in side mount, but I'm on the corner of the ring and I'm like, okay, well, I know technically I'm supposed to turn in this way. But if I turn in this way, a knee could come in or he could stand up and kick me and soccer kick me, all that stuff. So it does change up your game plan a lot. So it forced me into a bad position given I was comfortable getting out anyways. But even also with the ring, you have people who are naturally kind of like slapping your hand. If your hand goes in the rope, your hand goes through the rope, your body, your head, all that stuff. A lot of people are already there to try to move you. So you have to really mind your spacing as well. It becomes very, very difficult, or even wall takedowns. It's a lot harder to get a wall takedown because the rope bends, it gives compared to the cage. You're not going anywhere.
And in 2023 and 2024, in less than 1 year, you fought three times with one opponent. So how great it was after this to be focused on just another fighter, not still the same.
Well, I was happy with it because one, my opponent was almost twice my height, very, very tall, very lanky at the higher weight class. So it was stylistically not a fun matchup for me. But then two was finally somebody different. When you fight somebody so many times or when you train for just one person, it's not that you get bored, but you know what's coming. So it's like, oh, I got to do the same thing over and over and over again. And sometimes the fights got canceled, whether it was travel restrictions, passport issues, or just things happened in the fighting business. So they would move us multiple times, and instead of just training for three fights for maybe about a year, we trained for each other for almost about 2 years. So we'd get so close to the fight and then push us back, and it's like so it became very very difficult, but. To fight someone new, especially now back at the flyweight division, people my height, oh, it's like a whole new world. I can do so many things again. My last fight, I threw a head kick. I wasn't gonna try to kick the opponent in Kosi in the belly that I fought three times because he was so much taller than me. I could kick him in the face, but if he caught my leg, I would just fall. So now it's a lot more comfortable. I'm having a lot more fun, and finally I get to fight other shorties.
Yes, and it was actually a really short time to fight three times with one fighter. So you can be maybe bored is not a great word, but you just want some new challenges, let's say.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, especially in your career, unless you're making me a lot of money, and this is like a boxing event or the Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz, when you fight the same person for in a sense the same amount of money, even if it is for a title, it doesn't give you that incentive to fight more. You're just like, oh, I gotta fight him again. All right, yeah, it's a battle of pride, but once you get older in the sport, or at least for me, 32 years old, you start to realize you want to make as much money as possible before this career is over, just because you don't know how much longer you can last in this career. This lifestyle is very, very difficult, especially when you fight so often.
And I actually remember beginnings of your pro career. You were IMMAF World Champion. I think that you are probably you were a first big, really big name, really big star from who came from IMMAF. And I remember your beginnings in like Titan. In your fourth fight, you fought against Pedro Nobre, who was UFC veteran, got over 20 fights. So at that point, it was like super crazy. And you get to the UFC. And if you can tell me, why did you have in the UFC just two fights? What happened after this?
So sadly, that's the bad story. So the whole time I'm trying to get into the UFC, I win the flyweight championship in my third fight, defend it in my fourth fight against Pedro Nobre. I bump up to make myself more appealing to the UFC. They go, "Hey, you're still young, you're not ready." Okay, even though I just beat a UFC veteran, okay, cool, I'll bump up. I bumped up, won the belt, and defended it, and then I went back down because the UFC still wasn't calling. I was still trying to bump up to maybe even featherweight, given the champion said no and the management just it didn't work. But finally the UFC called, and given they were calling me I received 10 last minute UFC calls, and nine of them were all 1 week notice. And for me, especially at that age, I was enjoying my life. I was like, you know what, man, I don't have a fight, I don't have a contract. Let me be fat and happy, enjoy, regular life. And then they would call, and I'm like, oh, I'm 30 pounds over, or I'm 15 kilos over. I can't make this weight. And so eventually they called me for the Jared Brooks fight, my debut. I originally said no because it was a 9-day notice. And I had about, again, 15 kilos to lose. And I'm like, oh, I can't do it. I told my nutritionist, he said, hey man, you can make the weight. You've been training. It's just gonna be really, really hard. It's not gonna be fun. Made the weight. I fought. I didn't perform my best, but I still got the TKO finish. I win, and they go, hey, you're gonna fight probably at the end of the year or next year. And this is in June. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna get fat and happy again, enjoy life a little bit, and then I'll start training maybe in August. Then they go, hey, you're gonna fight Alex Perez in 20 days. I go, well, no offense. I just kind of took a fight. I'm really tired. I'm still kind of beat up. I don't want to. They go, okay, well, you can say no, but then you probably won't fight until next year just because you denied a fight. I'm like, well, man, I'm receiving ultimatums now, and at the UFC level contract, it's 12 and 12. So the next fight, I'm making 14-14. So I'm like, I don't have much money to save for that long, especially in the States. So I was like, you know what, man, let me I guess I gotta bite the bullet and take the fight. I cut another 15 kilos, fought Alex Perez, but I was so drained mentally from the weight cut that I just wanted to weigh in and go home. I completely forgot about the fight. Fought, I lost my first TKO loss, and I go home. Okay, it is what it is. Then I start making mental health videos of like, hey, just kind of to be a big brother of how do you deal with confidence in a fight? How do you deal with nervousness? What you should do in your amateur career before you turn pro, stuff like that. But then DJ got traded to ONE FC. Ben Askren came in, and long story short, I was like, man, looking at everything behind the scenes, I go, I think they're gonna release and start cutting people in the flyweight division, and I made that public. And again, an assumption. I just assumed correctly that they were going to start releasing people because they gave away the UFC's best champion in history, Demetrius Johnson, to ONE FC, to a guy that they didn't even want in Ben Askren. And so they traded him. The video got really, really popular from BJPenn.com and MMAfighting.com. And UFC called me and they didn't like it. They go, like, how do you know that we're going to cut people? I was like, oh, so I'm right. They go, yeah, and you're the first person to be cut. And I was like, well, I have a 4-fight contract. Why am I being released? They're like, well, we can always find a loophole in the system, and technically, you lost. You didn't perform to our expectations, so we can release you from your contract, even though I still had two more fights left on my contract. So, with one loss being 8-1 total in my career at the time, I got released from the UFC and I immediately went to Brave just because at the time, once they released me, they released my former opponent, Jared Brooks, Justin Scoggins, and so many more. mean, they wanted to release Brandon Moreno, but Moreno, I think also being Mexican and getting paid less to fight down here, he's like, you know what? I'll take the pay cut, and which he did take the pay cut and ended up fighting for much cheaper than 10-10. But look how well it went for his career. I wasn't offered the pay cut. Um, I know Dustin Ortiz was making like 70,000 at the time or around that time because he was a good veteran. And number two in the world lost to Joseph Benavidez, or Joseph Benavidez right before he got released. And they were like, hey, we'll re-sign you, but for the entry level UFC contract. Which is again 10-10 or 12-12. And he's like, nah, I'm gonna just do bull riding. So he's a famous bull rider now, which good for him. So I ended up starting that UFC flyweight demise because I exposed that they were going to start releasing people in the flyweight division because it wasn't exciting. So that's why I got released. So even though after my two Brave contracts ended, I did try to come back with winning records and stuff like that, other championships, and they're not interested in me whatsoever. So I was like, you know what, man, let me take my flyweight career somewhere else, and I'm at Brave and RIZIN, and it's working out pretty well so far.
But actually, it's kind of crazy because even the fighters that you fought, Brooks and Perez, are like super high level, and of course,
Mhm.
like after this, you defeated like Amir Albazi, so also the one of the top flyweights right now. So I think that there should be no questions that your place about like when we are talking about skills is not only in the UFC but probably like top 15, top 10. So it's definitely was a bad decision like from the
Oh, well,
UFC.
thank you. But the hard part is, besides the last fight of Brandon Royval and Van, it's the division isn't that exciting. And that's why they're bringing in different people from around the world to immediately fight Pantoja. Steve Erceg, great fighter, but he had one knockout win. He was number 10, and you give him a title shot. Didn't make sense. You have the Asakura, who great Japanese star, but did he even make his UFC debut? His UFC debut is for the title because UFC is trying to move over to Japan and branch off and do more on the Asian side of the world. But they don't like Pantoja because he's not an exciting fighter. I think he's a phenomenal fighter. But you look at Mohamed Mokaev. Mohamed Mokaev was, I think, 33, 35, fight win streak from amateur to pro. Um, Defeats Manel Cape, who's probably in line for a title shot after Van. And they release him because he's trying to make the division exciting. Even though, yes, his fights might have not been the most thrilling, they release a guy with a winning record. So the UFC doesn't really respect the flyweight division too much. Again, shout out to Brandon Royval and Van for doing such an amazing job with their last fight, but it there's not much hype around the flyweight division, and that's why Pantoja is always co-main event because he's just kind of the name in a sense to bring people in, but they're hoping he loses because they want these boxing or fighting style matches instead of the jiu-jitsu style or wrestling type of events.
Yes, and actually, the DJ many years ago had some of these problems too. That they didn't consider him as the star, and I think that of course he's like much bigger now because of his podcast, because he's just making content for the
Mhm.
viewers. But in the end, I think that they probably can push him a little bit harder because he was like absolutely great fighter.
Well, I mean, you look at boxing, for example, and I think boxing is a great example of Manny Pacquiao, Gennady Golovkin, Lomachenko, anyone from any other country, people didn't know. But when boxing got behind them after they performed, again, the promotion does have to work. DJ did everything. He did flying arm bars, or suplex on an arm bar, like which is obviously super highlighted. No one's ever done that in the sport. We mess around and do it in practice. We don't do it in a fight. That's how good he was. And Ray Borg is a good fighter. So he was doing this to many people and demolishing them. I mean, there was a whole show based on him, hoping that he would lose. He wins and then eventually loses to Cejudo. But in general, they never respected him. Like the UFC never promoted him. I believe there was one fight. It was Sergio Pettis and Justin Benavidez, and they were in Chicago. and they were number one and number two. Joseph Benavidez was number one, Sergio Pettis number two. If Sergio would have won, they would have gave him the title shot. If Benavidez won, he wasn't getting the title shot because I believe at the time he already lost twice to DJ, so it didn't make sense. So he was the gatekeeper. Benavidez won. Sergio didn't get called up to the title and eventually went to Bellator. But that was a title eliminator fight, and that was in the UFC Fight Pass prelims before the whole Fox and ESPN deals. So at the time, UFC Fight Pass was still just starting. So not too many people were subscribed to it. There weren't all these other events where it's like, EBI and Luke's Fight League and Titan and all that stuff wasn't around at the time for UFC Fight Pass. So no one really cared. No one really watched it unless it was highlighted on social media. So you had this number one and number two guy, best in the world, possibly fight for the title next, or at least have, but they were shown off in UFC Fight Pass prelims. So that was the hardest part about being a flyweight, and even still now in the UFC, there's not much respect behind the name for that division. But right now, I mean, they have the show. You have Roy Echevarria, who just won a fight last weekend, and a few others in the UFC, contender series. So we'll see if they got highlighted a little bit more. But there's not much respect on the flyweight division name, not in the US at least. You need the UFC to back them up, and that's the hardest part.
Yes, yes, I would definitely agree that this is probably like skill-wise one of the best divisions. So definitely UFC should give a little bit more light on this one. And getting back to your career, because you fought in a few different countries, a few different continents, and which country was the best for you? And is there any other country that you would like to fight in?
I mean, I would love to fight in China just because the coolest thing about fighting is that I get to travel. I get to enjoy the world, not just fight in the States. I as much as I love fighting in the States out of convenience and obviously fan base and sponsors, it's so much more fun to fight overseas. My last fight was in Tenerife, Spain, the Canary Islands, where I'm half Mexican, half Puerto Rican. So my ancestry is from those islands. I fought in Mauritius, Africa, where I know Madagascar, but I'd never heard the island Mauritius. Or years later, I get sponsored by the Prince of Bahrain. Like at the time I was very ignorant. I was like, dude, Aladdin is gonna sponsor me? Who's like Bahrain? I've never been to, or I've never even heard of the country, of the typical Middle Eastern countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, stuff like that. But I get to go to places that I've never been to before. I've trained in Dagestan. I was supposed to have a fight in Russia. I've been to Kazakhstan and all these different countries. So I hope to one day fight in China and just different countries overall, more the Asian side of the world, maybe one day in Australia. The hardest part, though, for example, I fight in Japan, July 27th. I'm trying to leave a week before the fight, before I start my water load, because it is almost a 20-hour travel day. It is 15 hours ahead of where I'm at now. So it's not just the jet lag, but also getting used to the time difference. And it's not a few hours, it's not half a day, it's more than half a day, and I lose the day. So it becomes very different. But Japan is probably so far the most fun country to fight in because my first day there, I walk into the hotel. There's people like fans in the hotel having, and you see my Power Rangers like anime stuff for me that they're giving me. They're like, "Oh, we're so happy you came to our country." If it weren't for the rise in the Japanese fans, um, causing in a sense a commotion for the flyweight tournament, I wouldn't be in it because I'm a last minute call. It was supposed to be an eight-man tournament, but because I made a post and they wanted me in the tournament, they're like, "We want Torres," and now I'm in the tournament because of the fans. So I think the Japanese fans are so much support and love, and the country is beautiful. So I'm excited. I have everything on my TikTok of like all my stuff saved, the food places to go, and sights to see. So I'm very, very excited for it.
So it definitely seems to be a great experience, not only fight, but like all the rest of it.
Well, I get to the coolest thing is, I come from the inner city in Chicago. The 4th of July is a big, celebration in the US. It's our Independence Day. And in Chicago, I mean, we're not the best city in the world when it comes to, being safe. So I believe for the 4th of July, 50 people were shot and I believe 5 or 10 people died. Like it's not like every holiday is a scary thing because it's like, yay, fireworks. Was that noise fireworks or were those gunshots? That's the hardest part. So for me, being able to make it out of the city, making it out of the country, like I live in Mexico City right now, Mexico, and now I'm fighting in Japan. I'm taking people from here that have never been out of the city or out of the state of Mexico City or never even been out of the country. And I'm taking them to a place that you know, you just see in movies, or again, Mexico's very big into anime. So they're like, we're going to Japan where they make Dragon Ball Z and they make this. I'm like, yeah, dude, it's on now, So it's really cool to not just go to a different country, but Japan is a very, very different world. And to be able to bring people with me, especially because of the sport, the things I'm able to do, I never thought I'd be able to do it. So it's a blessing. No matter how much pain I go through and the weight cuts and all that stuff, at the end of the day, it's cool that I get to bring people with me to enjoy everything.
Okay, Jose. So many thanks for the time and for conversation. I think that this fight, at least on the paper, is the best of this tournament. But I definitely think also that it will deliver, because when they're like when the two high-level martial artists like styles collides, I think that it will be super interesting one. And of course, with your win, I think that you're going for final. It's like obvious choice.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. Yeah, it should be a very fun fight. We talked to Hiromasa about it too, and he's not going to lay and pray because he knows I'm going to be moving. So we have to make it a fight. We have to put in a show for the fans. Plus, for people who don't know, it's a 5 fight tournament. So only four make it to the semifinals. So that means the 5 fights have to perform, and the fans will pick out of the 5 winners which four will move up. So we're not just fighting to win, we're fighting to make it exciting to win twice, not just to fight, but also to vote from the fans and their love and support to be able to move up and be allowed to the semifinals. So, no, Hiromasa and I, we're veterans in the sport, man. We're gonna put on a great show and hopefully even compete with the Brandon Royval, Justin Vaughn fight.